In this lesson titled Sparklines, we're in Workbook 07, Creating Charts, and we're on Worksheet tab, Sparklines. The reason we cover Sparklines in our Creating Charts lesson group is because Sparklines are kind of like small charts that fit inside of a single cell. So all Sparklines fit inside of a single cell. Let's take a quick look at the way they work. I'm going to make a selection way down here. And I'm going to go to my Insert tab. And this is where we find charts. We have a chart group. And you might want to refer to some earlier lessons about charts. But over here, we have our Sparklines group. We have line, column, and win-loss. Let's look at each one of these. So I have this selection all the way down here, away from my data. And I'm just going to click line. When I click it, it asks me two questions. Where is the data to make this Sparkline, this little chart? Where is the data? And where do you want me to locate the Sparkline? Where should the Sparkline be placed? So I'm going to say, well, here's the data, and I want it to be placed, so I need to get rid of this data here. I'm going to hit backspace just to make sure it's clear. And I want to place it right there. Yes, that's correct. And say OK. And so here is our Sparkline. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit. The bottom right, I'm going to tap my plus zoom a few times so we can get a nice clear look at this, and I'll scroll over a little bit and we see a Sparkline. It's the trend, the overall trend of this data. So it's taking all of this data over here and then showing it to us here. So we can see the very first point here is 197. And then it goes up considerably to 251 and then back down. So it's a trend. There's no numbers or anything. It's just a trend that you can look at. And these really are quite popular in analytics today. People love to see these little trend lines. You even see them on financial websites a lot where they show you trend lines really without even numbers sometimes. Well, what if we already knew that we wanted this all the way down here for all of these? So we know about this little autofill trick. Could we grab that and pull it down? Yes, that works. So it's kind of like a formula that way, and it will make them all the way down. I'm going to go ahead and delete these. And to delete them, we're already in the Sparkline tools, but I activate my Design tab, and there is a clear. If you're in the Sparklines tools and Design tab, there is a clear, and it says clear selected Sparkline. So let's try that again. I just want to show you there are some advantages to pre-selecting your data. So I could select all of this data, go to Insert, Sparklines. I want a line, so I click here, and it says, oh, I already know your data range, but where do you want it located? Well, I'm going to click right here, but I'm going to make a little mistake because I want you to see if you can see this mistake. I select where I want my Sparklines, and I say OK. The reference for the location of your data is not valid. So if we say OK, you'll notice that this selection here was too high. I included the headers, and I didn't want the headers because here is where all the answers go. So I'm going to say OK. And you might see that from time to time. Look out for that. So with a few clicks, I have all of my Sparklines here. Let's do some Sparklines again here, but this time first I'm going to select the destination. And then I'll go to Insert, Sparklines, and you see it already knows the location. I just need the data. So I'm going to select my data and say OK. Now what's interesting about this data is that it has some negatives. You see the highs and you see the lows, but you see those here too, the highs and the lows. So you wouldn't really know that there's negatives in here, would you? You'd have to look over here. Well, to make sure that your audience and you are aware of negatives, we might want to put in access to show where 0 is right through here. And there's a great way to do that. You can select all of these, and all we have to do is, if we're on our Design tab, there is a command up here called Axis. We click on that, and one of our choices is Show Axis. So I'm just going to say Show Axis. And now we actually have an axis line, and we can see when it dips below 0. And we can see on this one, for instance, right here, that it really does dip below 0 quite a bit before it comes back up. So very useful. What if we decide that we want a different sparkline? Well, we're on our Design tab up here, and you can actually change the type at any time, because over here under Type you have line and column and win-loss. Now, of course, we could go back to the Insert tab and start over, but it's just nice to know that I could just say column, and suddenly it would become a column. Now, anytime you have sparklines, you do have lots of choices to make, like with charts and tables and other things. So I can change the overall style. I can drop down here to see even more styles to choose from. And there's even the overall color of the sparkline. We can get that for sure. We can do something called marker color. You can mark the high points and the low points and have those, or even negative points if there are any. So that's very useful. You can even come over here under Show Group and say I want to make sure the first point is lit and the last point. But personally, I think that's a little redundant. They can see that, at least on this type of chart. Or the high point and the low point. You could mark both of those. So the only one left really is win-loss. And win-loss, if I click it here and change it to win-loss, you'll see that everything is a win. There's no negative numbers. But let me change one of these to a negative number. I'm going to click on it here so it's highlighted. I'm going to come up over here to my formula bar because I can also edit there. Put my cursor in front of there. I'll put a little dash for a negative and enter to accept. And now it doesn't quite fit. We can always come up here and grab our column and pull it over just a little bit. Or I could double click for best fit. And there's my negative, and you see I have all these are wins and those are losses. It's not showing me total amounts, it's just simply a win or a loss. You can make changes to your win-loss. I come over here to my Design tab, and we can make sure things like sparkline color, we can choose any color we want, like maybe something a little darker, but the win and loss is still the same. I go to marker color, and I can say negative point, and I can choose a color for my negative point. And so now my negatives are red and my positives are blue, but I only have one negative number right here. So that's how you'll need to change win-loss if you work with that. Let's look at one other place where we might want to have sparklines, and that's at the bottom of a column. This is a little different than you normally see, but it definitely can be done. We'll come over here to Insert, over to our Sparklines group, and maybe we'll choose here column. It already knows our location because that's where we started. We'll put in the range right here and we'll say OK. And so we can see this going left to right, and our data is from top to bottom. So it's a little trickier, but it definitely can be done.